Welcome to
The Curiosity of
A Child.
Episode 23. We are back after a long break, aren't we?
Yeah.
Normally we release every 2 to 3 weeks, but I had my birthday, so that was one weekend out. And then due to age, I managed to twinge my shoulder, and I'm still recovering now. But we're back, aren't we, mate?
Yeah.
And last episode we were in the kitchen, but this episode we're back in the studio.
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about?
Nuts.
When you visit the supermarket this time of year, you always find lots of nuts, won't you?
Yeah.
And they're part of a winter tradition. As I remember when I was about your age, Granny and Gramps, they'd always have some nuts at Christmas time, and they never got fully eaten. They'd always be sitting there. And we never had them any other time of year either. It's only at Christmas. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But nuts, they've always been a really important food source for people. As they ripen late in the winter, they were a great winter food for early man, and they're usually stored for long periods as well. In islands during the Mesolithic period, so that's about 8,000 to 4,000 BCE, there are shelves of hazelnuts commonly found in excavations.
Yeah.
And I think we also mentioned in our chocolate episode, that's episode 9, that hazelnut shells being found on the Isle of Skye, dating back 8,000 years. This continued into the Neolithic period, so that's about 4,000 to 2,500 BCE. That's when kind of early farming began. But even with more settled populations and people producing more and more kind of food themselves on the land, still 87% of sites excavated contained traces of hazelnuts. So it shows how important they are.
Yeah.
Then right into medieval times, they remained an important part of people's diets. Due to the importance around them, it means that a lot of kind of folklore and history has kind of grown up around nuts. And it might also be the semi-permanence of some of the great trees like oak trees help to add to their mystery and that folklore around them.
Yeah.
And they were seen as important places of wisdom.
That's why in books you kind of have like the magic trees and kind of wise. If you had talking plants and stuff, the trees would always be the wisest. And maybe that's because they can get so old as well.
Exactly, yeah. It's like the tree of life, and they kind of lived, or they're as old as the land, aren't they? And they kind of as long as memory. But our change in nut consumption also points at how the landscape has changed through man's activities. So going from vast forests everywhere, full of nut-producing trees, and those made way for field modern agriculture, haven't they?
Yeah.
So this episode, we're going to look at a couple of trees and some of the folklore and the history around them. We also have an interview with the host of Chestnut Chat, so listen out for that at the end, and you'll get to learn all about the game of Conkers. So should we get on with the show?
On with the show. Sounds good.
We're actually going to start with a story by you, which you wrote for your school homework, but actually seems rather fitting. Maybe a modern folk tale.
Long, long ago, in the mists of ancient time, a hopeful but filthy beggar befriended a playful squirrel that could talk. The squirrel's name was Nutfred. He proved a faithful servant to the beggar by first stealing him a small bowl. The beggar was thankful for Nutfred's generosity. The beggar said,
"If you bring me some food, I'll do my best to build you an home."
"Deal," cried the helpful squirrel approvingly. The next day, Nutfred journeyed through the busy streets, searching for what the beggar had asked for: food. To the talking squirrel, this meant hazelnuts, acorns, chestnuts, and many more. So that's what he gathered: a plentiful supply of nuts. Meanwhile, the beggar was doubtful he could return his part of the deal, and was fearful if Nutfred would continue to do his job. The beggar hoped the squirrel would be pitiful and give him another chance. Later, when Nutfred returned, he slumped down his loot. The beggar was horrified. Then he picked up a handful and sprang to his feet.
"I have an idea!"
he yelled triumphantly. 2 years later,
"The beautiful money is rolling in, old pal,"
said the loaded beggar. "The nut trading business has really improved our income, hasn't it?" questioned Nutfred.
"Indeed,"
replied Mr. S. Beggar.
"Oh, and how's the mini mansion coming along then?"
"Brilliant, good chap. The whole family's moving in next week. All 130 of us," Nutfred responded. The end.
Thank you. So that's a modern nutty folk tale. So, Anton, what's a nut?
I don't know.
There you go. Do you want to find out? Okay, so a nut is actually a fruit with a hard shell and a seed inside which can be eaten. And lots of nuts are not actually nuts, so there's lots of not nuts. Peanuts, cashew nuts, walnuts, Brazil nuts aren't actually nuts. These are seeds or legumes. But we don't want to talk about those. We want to talk about real nuts today. So we're going to start with hazelnuts, okay? Which I'm sure the squirrel certainly enjoyed in your story.
Yeah.
Now, hazel, it's a tree that can grow to about 12 metres tall and live for 80 years, but they're often coppiced. And that means that the stems of the trunk are cut down close to the ground. And when they're managed like this, they can actually live for hundreds of years. And they're more like a large shrub than a tree. So it's not a particularly big by tree terms. What's good about hazel is the branches, they can be really easily twisted together. So they were used for thatching spars and wattle and baskets and more. So you would have seen them all weaved.
That would have been a really good multi-use. Hazel trees would have been really good multis because in Celt times probably, because they would use their wattle and daub and stuff, and then they could use the hazel branches, and they get food as well.
Exactly, yeah. So you can understand why they're so important to people and why you might get the folk tales that we're going to tell some of.
Yeah.
Now, hazel, it's got both male and female flowers. So there's a picture here. And so these yellow kind of things that look like little fluffy tails hanging down.
Look a bit like caterpillars.
Those are the male flowers. And they have these little tiny red buds. Those are the female ones.
Tiny.
The female flowers typically develop into 1 to 4 knots in a little cluster.
They do look a little bit nutty from that small. They kind of got the rough shape.
Now, it's believed that a rod of hazel could protect you against evil spirits or be used for water divining.
I think that it's divining, not divining.
And the nuts could cure fevers or coughs and also clear your head. Some people even said that hazel could turn you invisible.
Whoa.
Yeah, pretty good. And you just mentioned the Celts, actually. So for the Celts, it was known as the Tree of Knowledge and was also seen as a symbol of fertility. There's a tale of an ancient sacred pool around which 9 hazel trees grew. And come later in the year, the hazelnuts would drop into the pool and they'd be eaten by a salmon that lived there. And the salmon itself is a fish that was revered by druids. And the number of spots on each fish would show how many nuts they'd eaten and also how wise they'd become. In one tale, a druid master catches the wisest of all the salmon because he wants to eat it and get all of the knowledge for himself.
Yeah.
So he asked one of his apprentices to cook it for him, but under no circumstances must the apprentice eat any whatsoever. So can you guess what happens?
He eats it.
No, not exactly. Well, yeah, but what happens is whilst cooking, there's like the bobbling pot of water with the fish in there, and some of it splashes out and hits the boy's hand, and it kind of scalds his hand, so he puts it to his mouth and gives it a good suck because of the pain. And from that, he actually gained all the knowledge of the salmon, which itself had come from the nuts. And his name was Finn MacColl, and he was a legendary figure in Irish mythology. And he was also one of the giants who created the Giant's Causeway. So here's the Irish one who fought the one from Scotland. It does, yeah, they're all hexagons. Do you know how they're made?
By the giants.
Ah, well, some scientists say that they formed 50 to 60 million years ago when volcanic rock rapidly cooled and contracted. As it shrinks, the pressure builds up, causing stresses and cracking to occur at 120-degree angles, making the hexagons. So I don't know if that's got anything to do with the rock having like a crystalline structure or not, but I don't think I believe that. I think I believe the giants made the causeway.
Actually, I think that it's pre-cut in the ground, and then when that does happen, it all goes kind of rough.
But what would happen if you picked the nuts before they're ripe?
Not sure.
Well, this is another tale here. A little bit darker, this one. So enter Melch Dick, a guardian of ancient forests who warned against picking hazelnuts before they were ready. Now, way back in our second episode, we told the story of the fairy invasion of Guernsey. So you know about fae folk, don't you? They're not always so good. And Melch Dick had a dark side too. I'm going to tell you the story now. Now, I think this comes from Yorkshire. So maybe when Granny was a young girl and walking through the woods, she would have been under the watchful gaze of Melch Dick. So can you tell me an animal that loves nuts?
Monkeys. Squirrel.
Because what's funny, I wrote these notes before you wrote your story, and I thought it's perfectly fitting what you've done. So there's a squirrel.
Karate squirrel.
Yeah. It's a cool picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's find out why they love nuts so much, shall we? One late autumn day, a group of boys ventured into the woods to collect hazelnuts and acorns. There was a mix of older boys and younger boys, and one called Dode who had a lame leg. This meant he was rather slow and he really struggled to keep up with the other lads. Then all the best nuts had already been taken, and so all he could grab were the green, unripe ones, which you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
After a long day of foraging and collecting a great number of nuts, dusk fell, so they decided to set off home so not to get lost in the forest in the dark. The older boy shouted to Dode to keep up with them as they trudged down the barely visible paths, out of the woods and to home. Soon Dode was lagging far behind and had lost sight of the other boys. Looking around in the shade under an oak tree, he saw one of his friends waiting for him, so he hurried across as fast as he could. As he approached, he realised it was not one of the boys, but a rather strange old character. His clothes were covered in moss, and on his head was a cap of red fur. And from him came the oddest of smells. It's like the entire essence of the forest and the wood and all the trees. And he was Melch Dick.
Dun dun dun!
He looked at Dode and said, "Now then, Dode, where are you going to?" Feeling a little scared, Dode replied,
I'm off home.
"Well, I'm going your way, so if you'd like, you can come along with me. You'll not recognise me, but I can tell who you are by the way you favour your mother." Together they started to walk through the woods, and Dode told Melch Dick how keen he was about animals.
And most of all, I love squirrels, but they're too fast for me to catch.
Upon hearing this, Melch Dick's ears pricked up, and he told of how he'd been climbing trees earlier that day and caught a squirrel. Worried but excited, Dode agreed to go with him to fetch the animal, but he mustn't stay long. Melch Dick's eyes glinted in the dimming light, and off the path they walked, deep into the woods between the great oaks and birch trees. As they walked, they chatted some more.
Why are you covered in moss?
Asked Dode. If you were to climb trees the same as I have, answered Melch Dick, then you'll be covered in moss too, I'd say.
And why do you wear a cap of red fur?
Why shouldn't I wear a cap of red fur? I'd like to know. My mother makes them for me out of the squirrel skins, and they're fearful warm in the winter. They'd been walking a long time, so Dode asked again about his squirrel. Wait a while, said Melch Dick, and I'll show you more squirrels than you've seen in all of your life. They reached an old pond in the middle of the woods. It was small but deep. Melch Dick took a whistle from his pocket and blew a few notes. All around, the foliage rustled, and in the moonlight that filled the small clearing, squirrels jumped and danced between the boughs overhanging the pool of water. Melch Dick continued to play, and more squirrels came, and began leaping and prancing in a great circle around the pool. Dode looked up and watched them excitedly. Faster and faster they went, and the whistle let out a shrill shriek that filled the wood. Dode was transfixed, mesmerised, his body shaking, and he felt himself spinning around. His legs collapsed, and he fell in the leaf litter, under Melch Dick's spell. His senses were gone, and he was going to be turned into a squirrel, as has happened to so many boys and girls who picked unripe nuts before. And I'm going to leave the story there and let you decide if he escapes or not.
I don't think he does.
Maybe he was the helpful talking squirrel in your story. And there's several other similar woodland spirits, such as Chur Milkped and Not Nan, who had chased children away with hot pokers. I've got a photo of Melch Dick here, tormenting a rabbit.
That's not very nice.
And this is actually from a calendar, and it's the 5th of February, which is World Nutella Day. And no discussion of hazelnuts would be complete without the mention of the world's favourite spread. Apparently it outsells every brand of peanut butter combined, and that's because peanuts are not real nuts, are they? Fake nuts.
Yummy nuts.
Yeah, it was good.
But I think a lot of that is because people have allergies. But people have allergies to Nutella as well.
Yes. 365 million kilograms of Nutella are made every year.
Oh.
And that's the same mass as the Empire State's Building. Not weight, but mass. And today, most hazelnuts are grown in the mountains of northern Turkey. They account for 70% of the world's production, and Ferrero, who make Nutella, buy about 30% of those nuts. So we covered some of this on our chocolate episode, which you should listen to.
You should listen to all our episodes, really.
That is true. But they're not actually produced in big farms. It's actually thousands of tiny farms, kind of on the steep hills. And the labourers who collect the nuts often have really poor wages and working conditions. And they spend long hours harvesting the crop by hand, because you can't use machinery because the hills are too steep. There's also some child labour there. It's meant to be illegal, but sadly it does still happen. And there's a really interesting podcast on BBC Sounds, which I'll link to in the show notes, which you should listen to. Then the journalist there, he sees like 12-year-old boys and girls, they're carrying 35 kilogram bags of nuts across the hills. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's hard work, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Now, Frere do say that they're striving for 100% traceability for all nuts. But it's hard to know how much of this is lip service. And with thousands of farmers and brokers in the area, it's a really complicated task for them to do. So sadly, it seems that hazelnuts, they don't hold that beautiful mystery of knowledge and folklore that they once did, do they?
They still hold the beautiful taste.
They do, that's right, yeah. The stories about them today might be even darker, because it's all about profit margins and exploitation. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to end this talk of hazelnuts on a down note. So if you're one of our older listeners and you enjoy the taste of hazelnuts, then you might like Frangelico, a hazelnut-flavoured liqueur that comes in a cool-shaped bottle. It looks like a Franciscan monk.
Oh, that's cool.
It's supposedly named after a hermit monk called Frangelico, who created unique recipes and liqueurs. And the more I kind of read about medieval monks through doing this podcast, the more fun it seems they had at times.
You just think I was boring. Old people, but they like doing creative things.
Definitely, yeah.
Or you just think they waste their time doing massive letters when they write their scripts.
Oh, I love that. I love illuminated texts. So we're going to talk about another nut now.
The horse chestnut.
Thank you. Why is they're more commonly called
Conkers.
And we actually went to the park to record this bit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we were a bit late in the season to find any, but we did find a few, but they weren't great.
Yeah, well, we found the husks of some horse chestnuts, which I seem to be struggling to remember. And at the end of this feature, we've also got a very special interview with a representative from Conker Cup. So you might be able to hear some voices around us, because we're in Sunray Park now looking for our second nut, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we're looking for horse chestnuts, but unfortunately we're actually a little bit late in the year. And we've come down to Sunray Park, so you may be able to hear birds and chattering and all sorts around us at the moment.
Yeah.
So do you know the common name that they go by?
Conkers.
That's right, yeah. And now chestnuts are actually much larger than hazelnuts. Mm-hmm. The trees are, and they can grow up to 40 metres tall.
Yeah.
And they can live for up to 300 years. And they're not actually related to sweet chestnuts either. Some people might think they are because of the name. Now, unlike hazelnuts, chestnuts, they're not safe to eat. But there are Victorian recipes for making flour out of them, chestnut flour. But if you had too much of that, it could be poisonous.
So if you only need like 5 grams of flour in your cooking, that would be good.
Yeah. However, they were fed to horses, which is maybe where they thought they got their names. They could actually help relieve horses from coughing and different things like that.
I wonder what it sounds like when they cough.
Yeah. Horse chestnuts, they're not actually native to the UK. Mm-hmm. And they come from the Balkans and Turkey.
Yeah.
And they were introduced to the UK in the 16th century. So this means that they're actually more often found in kind of gardens and parks than out in the woods, which is why we're at the park now. Oh, hello. But unfortunately, we've not been able to find any, probably for a bit late in the year. This also means that they don't have much the folklore about them, which you would find with hazelnuts.
Yeah.
Like the nature spirits and things protecting them. But they do have an interesting, more modern story.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please.
Okay. In 1917, during World War I, there were children, like school children, they were recruited to go and find conkers and also collect acorns. And we've seen lots of acorns around. Well, it was for the war effort. And the notices pinned on classroom walls. They would say things such as, "This collection is inviolable war work and is very urgent. Please encourage it." And then in exchange for the haul, the kids would actually earn some pocket money. So it's
nice.
It became very popular. And about 3,000 tons of conkers were collected in 1917. It's a lot, isn't it?
A lot.
And they were sent to several facilities around the country for processing with a bacteria called, I'm going to get this wrong, Clostridium.
Clostridium acetobacillarium.
That'll do, thank you. And then this produced a chemical called acetone. And do you know what that was used for?
Nope.
Well, it's actually crucial in the production of explosives such as nitroglycerine and cordite. And cordite was a kind of smokeless explosive that was used to replace gunpowder in weapons.
And here's how to make it. So first you get your beep, and then you get beep, and then to finish, top it off, beep.
It's funny you say that. It's when I was at school, we used to ask the science teacher how to make it, and he'd never tell us. Yeah, so as I said, it's crucial in the production of explosives. And it's actually discovered by a Russian biochemist who was at Manchester University at the time. And he was called Charin Weizmann. So he's a very wise man.
That's not a Russian name.
Well, he was a Zionist, and such was the gratitude of the Ministry of Munitions for helping them out, that helped lead to the Balfour Declaration. That was when the British called for the establishment of Israel in Palestine.
Yeah.
So the founding of the nation of Israel. And Weizmann, he actually became the first president of Israel.
So Russian president of Israel.
And now, unfortunately, many of the Conkers actually rotted before they were able to be processed.
That's sad.
Well, yeah, there are stories of like these great big sacks of them being left at train stations, rotting. And also due to all the secrecy that they were being used for, so obviously didn't want the Germans to find out about why we were collecting all of them. Some people actually suspected that they were being collected by school children, and then somebody was selling them on for more money. And it was even brought up in Parliament. And the reply that they got was they were required for certain purposes.
Nice answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true, I guess.
And despite the poor success, Conkers were actually again collected during the Second World War.
Yeah.
For the same purpose. So, yeah.
Conkers.
Hate the feeling of nuts slapping against you? Fed up with Conker-related injuries? You're not alone. Many Conker enthusiasts suffer from the medical condition Conker contusions. NutCorp has the answer with the Nut Deflector Arm Protector. Made from the finest low-grade plastic, the Nut Deflector Arm Protector can take the sting out of any Conker. The double-stitch elasticated arm strap provides both comfort and security, even in the most aggressive of Conker games. When you need your head in the game, you need your arm in a Nut Deflector Arm Protector. Available exclusively at conkercup.com for only $9.99.
Now up next, very, very exciting, we have our first proper interview, and it's a representative from the Conker Cup. And he's going to tell us all about the art of playing conkers. So enjoy the interview.
I'm excited.
Chestnut Chat.
We're joined by a representative from the Conker Cup here, who wishes to remain anonymous.
Yep. He's bonkers about conkers, though.
That's right. So, hello. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, I am. I think I should just be referred to as Mr. Conkers, actually. I'm one of the founders of Conker Cup and ConkerCup.com. And I have to say, I'm super excited to be on your podcast. I am a big fan.
Thank you very much for coming on. We're big fans of your podcast too.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about various nuts this episode, hazelnuts and chestnuts.
Yeah.
And we don't really know that much about conkers, so we're hoping that you could teach us some more. So can you just give us an introduction to what conkers is and how it's played, please?
Sure. Is this a 2-hour episode then? Because I can talk about conkers for a very, very long time. I'll tell you what, I'll try and keep it short for you guys. So, Conkers. Conkers is a game that is primarily played in the UK, although I am trying to export it internationally, and it's over 170 years old. So it's a pretty sort of tried and tested game. It's played between two people with a horse chestnut that you hang on a lace, and one person holds the lace out at arm's length with it wrapped around their fist, rather. And the other player wraps it around their own fist and then swings their nut at the holder's nut. And the aim of the game is to de-string your opponent's conker. So you take 3 strikes, and then if the conker still stands or still on the string, then you swap roles. So you then hold your conker out at arm's length, and the striker strikes you 3 times, and you go on and on and on. And that lasts for 3 minutes. And if at the end of that 3 minutes, the conkers still haven't been de-strung, you go into what is called the bonkers conkers minute, where you have a minute of alternate shot, and you have to just try and hit your opponent's conker as hard as you can, and essentially de-string it. Now, they're the very basic rules. There are a number of different variations and different games that you can play as well. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yes, we know that there's the gentleman's game and also street conkers. So how do they vary from the kind of the traditional main sport?
Yeah, well, this came about. There are a lot of conker purists out there who get very frustrated when you start to, change the rules. So at Conker Cup, what we've done is we've developed tournament rules, which is for the actual Conker Cup itself. So tournament rules is all about testing an individual's skill at the game of conkers. So we don't want any conker tech to influence the player's ability. Therefore,
so it's very pure then.
Absolutely. So in a tournament game, all conkers, all laces, and everything is provided by the tournament itself. So we have a conker sorting table. So we use class 2 conkers for the Conker Cup, which is essentially the size of the conker. They are all prepared in a kind of a highly scientific manner. It's all overseen by different people to check that there's no sort of mishandling of the nuts, and then the tournament is just about the skill of the player. Now, on the flip side, the bad boys of conker favour what we term street conkers. So this is where they like to pimp up their conkers. So they bake them, or they'll paint them with varnish, or leave them to soak in vinegar to try and harden the nut. Some of them will even paint the conker itself to make it scarier and more menacing. And street conkers is, as it sounds, it's a much more aggressive game. There are things called stringsies and stampsies, which come into play in street conkers, which are absolutely outlawed in tournament conkers. And what stringsies and stampsies are is sometimes when two players are in a bout, they'll swing their conker, and the two laces will essentially get intertwined and locked together. Now, if you're playing in street conkers, you have the opportunity to pull your string as hard as you possibly can and yank the conker out of the other person's hand. Now, that will result...
Sorry, so the conker actually, you literally pull it from their hand then?
Because if you imagine the two conkers have got twined up together, so you've got... You're holding one end of the string, the opponent's holding the other, and there's a knot of conkers in the middle. If you yank yours hard enough, it can cause them to let go of their string. And if the conker falls on the floor, there is something called stampsies, which I'm sure you can guess what this is, which is if you've got a nice big conker, you lift your leg high and bring it down on their conker and smash it to pieces, and that constitutes a win. But that's a very aggressive game. I myself am not a street conker player. I don't play street conkers, but I have played gentlemen's conkers. So gentlemen's conkers is again a slightly different game. So it's kind of come about from the duels of the olden days, where they sort of walked back to back and then walked 10 paces, and it was a battle, but it was played against some sort of very sort of set gentlemanly rules. So, for example, you ask how your player is, how was their day. You then have a game. You're obviously allowed to bring your own nut, but of course, in a game of gentlemen's conkers, you would never do stringsies or stampsies. It's just not the done thing. And after 3 minutes, if no one has won, you simply retire for gin and tonic. And mainly that's why I play that game.
So much more dignified game then, it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, really, there's something for everyone in conkers. That's what I was saying.
Fantastic. So, Anton, what sort of style do you think you'd like to play?
I like stamping on things, say street conkers.
You're going to be a street conker, are you?
Yeah.
So we should be getting some vinegar and things to kind of harden your nuts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can paint them as well. I've seen some pretty aggressive painted conkers that are used in street battles. So I've seen some painted like angry birds. I've seen some painted with like gritted teeth on the front of them. It's like the old planes in the Second World War where they painted the fronts to look scary.
Yeah.
See, unfortunately, we actually went to the park the other day, and being so unprepared, we've missed Conker season, and all was left was a few husks on the ground, wasn't it?
Yeah, so sad.
So I think we're going to have to be waiting until next season.
This is not a problem because at Conker Cup HQ, we do something called the Nut Haul every year, which is where we all go out with our nut sacks and we collect conkers for the preceding year. And we obviously use some of them for the Conker Cup tournament, and the rest are laid down in a cellar. They're correctly kind of packaged up so that they don't shrink, that they don't mold. And so I have a fine vintage of Conkers, and I would be more than happy to pop some in the post to you so you could have a little Christmas bout of Conkers.
Yes, that is incredibly generous of you. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Okay, on to our next question then. These horse chestnuts, they're not actually native to the UK. So do you think that the game of Conkers is pushing out other local sports such as fox tossing, hot, hasty pudding eating, and dweil flonking?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest with you, and I feel awful that I didn't know about these sports prior to this conversation. But I have sort of subsequently done a little bit of research into some of these sports. And I have to say, I think the fact that fox tossing isn't practiced so much these days, it's not a bad thing. It's a very brutal game. So, Conkers may be pushing out some sports, but ultimately the sports that remains are the sports that really mean something to people. They have a special place in their heart. And as I said, Conker's been around for over 170 years. Actually, as far as I can see, it's getting a revival. It's just going from strength to strength. I mean, we're talking tens of players are now coming to the Conker Cup. So, who knows? In a few years, we could even be into triple figures.
That is, yeah, it's incredible the growth actually that you're seeing in the sport.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable.
You recently played your 2020 tournament, so how did this go? Did coronavirus affect any of it? I mean, what kind of things have you had to deal with this year with putting on the tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, coronavirus has obviously affected us all. We did toy with virtual Conkers, but actually all that happens is you tend to break your laptop screen rather than actually, breaking their nut. So we then thought about if we tied the Conkers to the end of 2-meter poles, but that is just very, very complicated and actually does result in quite a lot of injury. So what we did was...
very difficult as well to aim, I imagine.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, Conkers is...
And not accidentally.
Yeah, and Conkers is a highly technical and skilled sport as it is. So, trying to do that with a 2-meter pole is just even more. It's even more complicated. So, the World Championships, which is a different competition to us, they actually cancelled their event, which we thought was very sad. And we were determined that the Conker Cup should continue. So what we did was we took some advice and we developed a slight variation on traditional Conker Cup, which is that the heats were played in bubbles of 6. So whoever was in your COVID bubble, you applied via our website, and you were sent a Conker kit, which contained all of the Conkers that had been they were Class 2 Conkers that had been pre-drilled. You were supplied the laces. You were supplied score sheets and instructions, and also pin badges, because we're just such a lovely organisation like that. And they were dispatched to the individual, to the team leader. They then filmed themselves playing their individual matches, and the winner of each of those heats was then invited to a Conker Cup final where we wore masks. We did it outside. We took all of the correct precautions, and we had the final outside, and we were able to crown a champion. So COVID was a problem, but it didn't get in the way of our success. And we actually had Conker face masks made as well, which just made it a little bit more fun.
Yeah, fantastic. So it sounds like this kind of great sport of Conkers is not going to be stopped by something like Corona. I mean, it's just going to keep going.
Absolutely not. We just, it's like a battle, right? You don't just give up at the first hurdle. There are so many people that they look forward to Conker Cup. It's probably the highlight of their year, and to take that away from the fans, I think we felt would be, it's too much of a blow. We're already having a hard time as it is. So, our motto here is give the fans what they want, and I think we did that.
Yeah, you certainly have. Fantastic. And I think Anton's got a question for you now.
Yeah. So, should we be allowing children to play the game of Conkers? Because in recent years, in the news, there's been stories about safety concerns in the schools.
Well, I mean, there's two schools of thought on this. I mean, some say, kids should play it, toughen them up a little bit. And other people say, well, you've got to protect the kids because it's frowned upon to injure them these days. So again, we take a very sort of strict line on this. We do want to encourage kids to play, but safety is key. And actually, with Nut Corp, which is one of the big nut tech companies, we've developed something called the Nut Deflector Arm Protector, which is a piece of safety equipment that you place on your forearm. Not being nut swingers yourselves, you won't be aware of this, but one of the biggest injuries from playing Conkers is kind of a recoil from the swinger. So when the swinger swings, the Conker continues around and actually hits you in your own arm, which is very painful. So we developed this nut deflector arm protector. There has been backlash. Some people have said that it just looks like a child's shin pad, which is absolutely not true, because we wrote Nut Corp on it for a start. So there are a lot of kind of nut tech innovations that are coming out with safety in mind. There is also some eyewear. So we have the Nut Shard Eye Guard, which is obviously a pair of goggles that you can choose to wear. Again, we're not strict on that. It's up to parents. It's up to kids. We don't mandate it because, you need your wits about you when you're in a Conker battle. And I've never seen an eye injury from Conkers, but, it's there as an option. They're all for sale on our website. So, please, if you need them, go and get them. I think we've got our bases covered, but really, you can't beat just good training. You want to get yourself a good Conker trainer, making sure that you know how to handle a lace and that you're comfortable with the nut. You need to become one with the rig you're using. So whether that's lace and a nut together, but once you kind of feel the movement, injuries are very few and far between.
Yeah, and I guess as long as, like you're saying, you're training well and you keep yourself in good physical shape so that you can really control the swing when you are in your Conker battle.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Although I am still a little bit concerned because I hear what you're saying about all of these kind of safety equipment that's being provided now or is available for people to use. But during World War I, school children were actually asked to collect Conkers to aid the war effort, as they were important for the production of explosives such as nitroglycerine. So how safe is it really to be playing Conkers? I mean, if Anton was to start playing, is there a chance he's going to explode?
I mean, we can hope, but I think it's unlikely. So you're absolutely right. Conkers were used in World War I in the production of cordite. That's the word I was looking for. So they were used to help the production of cordite, which is awesome, right? Because Conker battles are all about, going to war with your opponent, and then we find out actual Conkers are used in war. I mean, it's perfect. They were absolutely used in that production. I don't think that they themselves were the exploding parts. I mean, just to give you another use for Conkers, they're also really good at laundry detergent. So, it's kind of opposite ends of the scale, exploding and then clean your clothes with them afterwards.
There's no end to what you can do with the Conkers, actually. Incredible nut, so I can understand where your love of Conkers comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I appreciate your episode is about nuts the plural, and I'm very much a single nut man. It's weird when you say it like that, but I am. And I really sort of tend to frown upon acorns and hazelnuts and these kind of nuts because they are just poor contenders to the mighty conker. But, I guess they have a place in society.
Yeah, the conker's got a bit more weight to it, doesn't it? It's more of a man's nut, I think.
However, I think that coconuts are still the best for conkers.
They are very difficult to string on a shoelace, though.
I guess.
Very difficult. Yeah. I mean, actually, one of the things that we did, and maybe you could ask your audience to help us out with this. We were starting a campaign to look for a substitute conker during off season. So when you're when the conker season isn't on, people want to continue training. They want to make sure that their skills aren't obviously going to waste. Now, you can use conkers that have been stored, which is great. But, they're not cheap. You have to prepare them. You have to store them correctly. You don't want to be using your best nuts just for practicing. So we are looking at the moment for substitute conkers. In fact, on our website, we've put some videos up of things that we've tried. We tried an egg. It was a mistake. Really. We shouldn't have really tried it with an egg. We tried it with potato. A Brussels sprout, surprisingly, so far has been exceptionally good as a contender. So
your Christmas dinner.
Exactly, yeah. Coming into Christmas, I mean, that could be the ideal kind of practice nut, or not nut.
Yeah, it really could. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's one of those things. We give it a score, but we really are still looking for the ultimate sort of. Practice conker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did try coconut, which is why I know it's very difficult to swing on a lace. I mean, it was stupid really because it's massive compared to a conker. But we like to kind of cover all of the bases.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think that probably concludes our interview, and thank you very much for your time. And if you want people to find out more about the Conker Cup, where should they find you?
Well, they should come to conkercup.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at Conker Cup.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
Chestnut Chat, whoa. Chestnut Chat, whoa. 08431223536. Hello at chestnutchat.com.
That was fantastic. I loved that interview so much. Really nice chat.
Our first proper interview. It was really, 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 really nice.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be doing some more in future as well after that. Really good.
We've got a few lined up. Well,
in our heads.
Yeah, we've got some plans for some.
Yes, maybe we need to think of a Christmas interview.
Yeah.
With Santa, perhaps.
Yeah, we could do Mummy again.
Yes, yep. So anyway, that's the end of our episode. So I hope you know a little bit more about hazelnuts and some of the folklore around them, and also conkers.
I have a feeling this was a bit of a longer episode, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yes, and please, please, please review us on iTunes or on Podchaser or Stitcher or Podbean or anywhere. Just review us, please.
Mm-hmm. And listen to Chestnut Chat. That's Conker Cup representative podcast.
Yeah, that's right. So if you search for Chestnut Chat in your pod player of choice, then you'll find them, and we will also link to them in the show notes and on Twitter. Speaking of Twitter,
they also have an Instagram as well, so you can follow them there.
Yes, conkercup.com as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of Twitter, what's our Twitter handle?
Oh, not this again. I can't remember. I don't do the Twitter.
CurieChildPod.
Oh, that's it. Our Twitter is CurieChildPod.
Well done. Well remembered.
At CurieChildPod.
Yes, and what's our website?
The Curiosity of a Child.com.
That's right. You can say that with more confidence.
The Curiosity of a Child.com.
That's right. So if you visit us there, you'll find the show notes some point in the future. So we will see you again soon. And with our Christmas special. And you need to think of some ideas, young man, because we need something good for that. Goodbye and thank you.
Bye-bye.
Love you.